Howdy, everybody. This video we'll talk about turnover and how does this affect playing the game. So you're always going to have to deal with difficult people in life and in trucking and in your carrier. It's just it's always true. No matter where you are, where you go, there's always going to be difficult people you have to deal with. But here's the good news. There's high turnover within the company. So let's just say, for example, you have a dispatcher or asset manager you don't like. A lot of drivers ask for a different dispatcher. Um, that's very common. They have a hard time working with that particular person for a variety of reasons, but primarily because maybe it's low miles. The dispatcher just isn't, you know, putting forth the effort that the owner operator needs in order to be productive every week. They're shortchanging them like 500 miles every single week. You know, that creates a problem for the owner operator. I mean, that affects the bottom line. That affects profitability. So it's not uncommon for an owner operator to want to change in dispatchers or asset managers at Crete. Uh, but Crete don't like do that. So you kind of get stuck with the asset manager dispatcher you have. But here's the good news: there's regular turnover. In the 10 years that I've been with Crete, I've been driving for 11. I've been with Crete for the last 10. I've had 20 different dispatchers or asset managers. These people come and go. If they're there for a year, that's like long term for a dispatcher. They typically aren't there for more than a year. They may be your dispatcher or asset manager for 6 months, maybe a year, and then they're gone. Either they quit the company, maybe they got promoted, or maybe they got fired, but they don't necessarily stay in that position. So this is kind of like playing a game, right? You don't want to let a few people or one person give you a bad attitude towards the entire company that includes several thousand people. There's, I mean, there's mechanics that'll help you out. There's parts managers that'll help you out. There's other drivers that'll help you out. But there'll be one a-hole in corporate. I guarantee you, it's true for every driver. That's not going to help you. It's actually going to be constantly in your way. You're going to have to deal with that person. And realize that more than likely you're going to outlast that person. They're not going to be with the company all that long. They have such high turnover that you know chances are 6 months to a year from now they'll be gone and you'll still be here. So this is kind of like playing a game. You're going to outlast some of the troublemakers. Why do you need to make a career change or a carrier change? If you get frustrated with one person, and so let's say, for example, you leave Crete to go to Schneider, well, then 6 months later, that person you had trouble with is no longer even with Crete. So you were perfectly happy, but you had enough of this one person. You wanted to get away from them. So you left Crete. Well, if you just waited 6 months, that guy would have been fired or left voluntarily. I met drivers, company drivers, that have been with Crete 20 to 30 years. Do you know how many asset managers or dispatchers they've gone through over that time span? They probably had 100 different people dispatching their truck over the course of their career. You think they quit every time they had a difficult one? No, they outlasted them. These guys have been in the company 20, 30 years, know how to play the game. They've seen these asset managers come and go. And it's like sometimes you get a good one, sometimes you get one that's kind of a jerk. It's like, yeah, you'd rather not deal with them, but Crete's not going to allow you to change, and you're not really willing to change carriers just because of this one. You're going to have to outlast them. You're going to have to play the game. You're going to, whether you like them or not, maybe you need to pretend a little bit. Um, just try to get along as best you can. Now, I'm not saying you got to send them a birthday card or a Christmas card, but if it helps, to get through it, then try to be civil, as best you can. I did a video about customer service, and my thing about customer service is I don't care who I'm talking to. I'm always saying yes sir, or yes ma'am, no sir, no ma'am. That includes these asset managers, these dispatchers. I don't do it because I want to, or I think they deserve the respect. I do it because I don't want any hassle with corporate. I don't want any hassle from anybody in the office. So if that means I gotta call some punk, yes sir, then I'll do that so I can get through the day. you know, you know, I may never met this person before, and he may have screwed me 100 times. I'll still call him yes sir. Why? Why would I do that? Well, because I don't want to argue with them. I'm not going to get anywhere by having a controversial relationship with this person. I'm somewhat stuck with them, and I know that I'm going to outlast them. I've been here 10 years. They've been here 6 months. They're not going to be here 6 months from now. They'll have another job opportunity within the company, or they'll find a job opportunity outside the company. But I guarantee you they won't be dispatching my truck for more than a year. So I will tolerate them, because I'm not going to change carriers because, I got an idiot for a dispatcher. I'll just outlast them, so I'll do my best to work with them and try to get the most out of them, as far as productivity. Um, some dispatchers are excellent. They keep me loaded, they keep me moving, highly efficient. But those are the good ones. They don't stick around either because they get promoted. So you get a good one, and you're like, I need you to stay around here for like the next 10 years till I retire. That's not going to happen. They're so good they got promoted. And then you got other ones that you're going to have to hold their hand. You're going to have to make sure you're clear what your expectations are. You're going to have to constantly remind them when you're going to be available, when you're going to deliver, and what your plans are, because these guys can't think more than 2 seconds at a time, whatever's in front of their face. So you got to constantly send them messages on PeopleNet saying, okay, I'm going to be available at 9 a.m. and then the next morning it's 8 o'clock. You go be reminding them again, I'll be ready at 9 a.m. You have to do that because they're unreliable, but you find strategies to deal with difficult people. You don't want to change carriers because there's a difficult person that you have to deal with. What if you change carriers and you have a difficult person there too? See, you're always going to have difficult people, always. Even on the spot market, those guys complain all the time. Who are they complaining about? Brokers and shippers and receivers, and slow trucks in their way. But they have to deal with difficult people too. So you can't escape it. You just can't. You can't go on the spot market to escape it. You can't change carriers to escape it. So you might as well learn how to deal with difficult people. And this is part of playing the game. It's like, yeah, I agree. It's total bullshit. They're costing you money. I agree. But what are you going to do about it? The only thing you really can do is outlast them. And in the meantime, try to get as much value out of them as you possibly can. Try to, it's almost like you got to train them. I swear, some of these new asset managers, dispatchers, they just walk into a desk, plop down on a chair, and they're learning from scratch. They don't know nothing. I swear they're so green that they don't know anything. So you, as the owner operator, don't get mad. You're gonna have to teach them, because they're probably brand new. They probably never done this before. Or the other situation is that they were dispatching company drivers, and they're just used to pushing company drivers around. They're like, they don't have to explain themselves. They don't have to try to do anything extra. They just tell the company drivers, here's your load, force dispatch, no ifs, ands, or buts. And then they get on the owner operator side, and they get all this pushback from the owner operators. And it's like, well, they were, a dispatcher, a halfway decent dispatcher, company driver, but they suck at being a dispatcher for owner operators. You're going to have to train them. They, it's just like a company driver trying to become an owner operator. They're like, there's no difference. Well, there's a world of difference. You may not think there's a difference, but you go from company driver to being owner operator, there's a big difference. I know a lot of company drivers firmly believe there's no difference between being a company driver and an owner operator. I'm like, okay, well, when you buy your truck, let me know, because I guarantee you're going to have a big wake-up call. Same thing with these dispatchers. They think dispatching company drivers is just as easy as dispatching owner operators. Then they get on the owner operator desk and they find out that's a whole new world, and they don't know how to handle it. you know, I always had disagreements with the new dispatcher. I have to train them. I always have to train them. It never failed. Over 10 years, I had to train them. And, it always comes down to a breaking point. And it usually comes down like this. The dispatcher will tell me, he's like, you only care about yourself. And my response is that, I'm glad you finally figured that out. This is my company, not your company. Don't try to run my company. I'm the one running my company. You're just a dispatcher. It's like, it always comes down to that. It always comes down to that. They try to dispatch you like a company driver. They think you should be there to, do everything they say and all this stuff. And it's like, well, I'll try to help you out here, but I am a small business owner. I am running my own business. And you sitting behind a desk aren't going to tell me how to run my small business. I'm sorry, but my business comes first. Crete comes second, So, if you think I'm selfish, you're right. I am. I'm glad you finally figured that out. It only took you 6 months to realize that the owner operator is in charge of his own truck. But, and then once I got them trained, they're finally trained, and then they leave, and now I got another person I got to train, same story, they want to run my truck, and here we go again, it never fails, never fails. But I don't leave Crete because of it. It's not going to be any different anywhere else. I'm always going to run into difficult people, and there's people in the shop that I've had difficulty with before too. Guess what? Eventually they retire or they leave the company. There's regular turnover in the shop. Even in contractor relations, I've had run-ins with them, and some of those people have since retired and new people have come in, and I'm still running 10 years later. All these people have come and gone. I'm still here, just like these guys who've been with the company for 20, 30 years. They see people come and go. Do they leave every time they have to deal with a difficult person? No. They learn how to play the game. They know they're probably going to outlast that person. And they're just going to play the game and try to get along and try to get as much out of them before they leave, before that dispatcher moves on. And then another person will come along. But the driver never leaves. The driver knows what the game is, and the driver plays the game. All right, guys, that's all I got for you. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the internet.